Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today. Now, we're definitely going to be avoiding the political talk in this video. Now, there's 4 things that you can do to help me. That's liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a donation. The most important of which is sharing this content. Now, you can reach me for donations at paypal.me/morelogmorningdigest. Now that that's out of the way, the topic we're going to be discussing this morning is something that has fascinated humanity from the very conception of our consciousness and the self-awareness that we have of being alive, and that is death. Death is one of those things that every single human being I have ever met is fascinated with to one degree or another, whether they be absolutely terrified by it or absolutely enraptured by the idea of the unknown that comes with death. And we all know from the videos that I've posted that I do not view this world as a physical realm, okay? If anything, I'm leaning more towards this being a simulation of one sort or another. And with this theory comes me looking at death in a very unique way. Now, for me to explain how I view this, I'm going to share a couple of stories about my life for this to make sense. Now, a lot of you know that I've struggled with substances. And in those struggles, I've gone through a lot of things. Now, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I should have died, okay? And I've witnessed friends lose their lives left and right. Now, naturally, when you go through that grieving process, you start thinking about what death is, right? And from the experience of me knowing that I could have just as easily have been my friend, it got my mind going. Because when I started thinking about that, I started thinking about the situations I've been in where I could have, if not should have, if not was my friend in that situation. And that got me thinking even more. Now, I'm not saying that I had a near-death experience per se, but I've had experiences where, by all recollection, I should be dead, but I made it through that experience and continued living. Now, that got me thinking to when I was a child, right? When I was 3 years old, I was being watched by a babysitter who wasn't doing the job properly and not watching me. And I unplugged a box fan with my mouth, all right? And it stopped my heart, almost killed me, etc., etc. I lost all my teeth before I was freaking 5 years old. I had to wait for them all to grow in, and when they grow in crooked and wicked brittle, whatever. But the thing is by all accounts on that day, I should have died, but I didn't. I continued living. Now, if we are structured inside of a simulation, who's to say that death is an actual thing outside of the programming of our death? Now, what that means is, for most of our existence as human beings, we've all heard the saying, when it's my time, it's my time. When death takes my number, death takes my number. And there's been Hollywood movies that have played off of this. Final Destination, for example. When your time's up, your time's up. Now, for example, let's say you put yourself in a situation where the simulation has to avoid your death. For example, you're in a simulation where you're put in a position where you're going to die, and there's no way for that simulation to calculate a way where you don't. What if I were to die right now because of a situation just like that, but instead of dying, I am instantaneously backed up in the simulation's memory, me and my reality. Everything that I've ever experienced is backed up and reinserted into a new simulation and just restarted from that point with a different outcome of my death. Instead of dying, I live. However, the simulation that I existed in prior to that actually experienced my death. So in turn, I'm never really dying. I'm just being moved to a new simulation, a new timeline, and the timeline I was in experienced my death, right? Now this gets you thinking, because do we ever die, or are we always continuously inserted into a new simulation? So all of us seeking immortality may very well be seeking something that we already have. And if you look at the holy books, they all talk about ascending into immortality, how our consciousness never ceases to exist. What if that's because our consciousness is just constantly being put into new timelines over and over and over again? So you have that possibility where we never cease existing. However, you have the issue of aging. In the simulation or the reality we're in, the human body does age, right? And if what I just said is true, that leaves a very scary proposition, because that would mean eventually you would continuously age, continuously die, and continuously be reinserted into a new simulation at that age just to experience it all over again. So this is what I'm getting at when I mean the computer has your death already programmed, and until that event happens, you will constantly be reinserted into a new simulation if you put yourself in a position that you cannot survive or the simulation can't get itself out of. Now, what happens if the latter is the actual chain of events that takes place and your death has a number? Where do we go after we leave this existence, after we leave this reality, after the simulation says you have served your purpose in this simulation and your time is up, right? It's predestined, you die now, you're dead. What happens next? Now, you run into a lot of very interesting predicaments here, and I'm going to tell you what I think the three most logical outcomes of this are. Is outcome A, we are in this current reality because we went to a carnival or an amusement attraction of some sort and volunteered to have our consciousness inserted into this reality, right, as entertainment, and we have no connection to the reality we were in prior to us being inserted in here. And when we get done, we're going to wake up in a completely different reality, and this is going to be nothing more than, say, Total Recall, for example. That movie is a great analogy to this. It's going to be nothing more than a means of entertainment, a means of escape, a means of vacation. Now, just based on the chaos that we're experiencing inside of this reality, I don't think that that's the most likely of scenarios, but that leads me to scenario number 2. Scenario number 2 is, if we are inside this simulation, inside this reality, it's because we committed a crime or atrocity so bad in the reality that we existed in the prior being here, that our consciousness was wiped, and we were put here as a punishment. And this would tie back into death having your number, your time being up. What if we are here to experience something or achieve something, and until that happens, we are kept here? Now, that may mean we reach a point where the computer says your body is physically too damaged in order for you to experience what you need to experience. So it pulls your ticket and you die and you're reincarnated and the whole process starts over again, right? Your prison sentence is extended, your consciousness is wiped again, and you're put back until you learn what you needed to learn. Or you achieve what you're supposed to achieve your first go through here, and when you achieve that, your ticket is pulled and your sentence is over and you're reinserted back into society. Now, there's a third scenario here that's plausible in my mind, And that's the most terrifying of all. And that is simply that we are a living historical record of something that has already happened. And our ancestors in the future are running simultaneous simulations over and 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 over again to achieve an understanding of how they got to where they are. And we are nothing more than ancestral memories being played out over and over again. And that would make a lot of sense as well, as far as when you are forced into a situation of death that the simulation hasn't accounted for, it can just kick you over to a different scenario, and you'd never even know. Your consciousness may be existing 100 different places all at once, just at different points in the timeline. And that is the most terrifying of all, because at the end of the day, not only has our existence already been played out, it's been played out an infinite amount of times, and there's no way for us to ever really know that that's what's taking place. Now, I think that that is not the least likely scenario, but I think it's the one that falls right in the middle. I think A, this is either a prison, B, an ancestral memory, right? An ancestral historical simulation, or the least likely of which is that this is an adventure ride at an amusement park. Now, the reason that I don't think that this is entertainment is based on the chain of events that we're experiencing. Now, what really does fascinate me about all of this is the fact that in order for a simulation to exist as though I've described, is there has to be somebody who initiated that simulation. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, the people or whoever it is, or the consciousness that started this simulation, are they themselves a simulation, or are they a physical reality? And the question you have to ask yourself at that point is, what defines a physical reality, and how would you ever recognize it if one truly did exist? The simple answer to all of these questions is we may never know, and in fact, I think it's very unlikely that we ever will find out. But I can tell you right now that the probability of us existing in a solid state matter like we are taught in science class as this being a physical reality is damn near impossible, if not infinitesimally small. The reason I'm going to tell you this is because once you achieve the ability to create a simulation and start playing with consciousness like this, once you create that ability, you open up Pandora's box. Now, a simulation can only be as intelligent as the people that programmed it. And in order for a simulation to exist, the intelligence to create a simulation must have already existed. So that means, unless the programmers of the simulation built in fail-safes, the simulation itself will be able to reproduce that technology and create a simulation within a simulation. And once that happens, that means the odds of you being a physical reality go down every single time a new simulation is created. And the fact that there's only one physical reality out of all of those simulations means the chances of you being the original product are infinitesimally small. And the fact that we can create simulations right now, albeit primitive, leads me to believe that you and I are nothing but zeros and ones. And the simple fact of the matter is, when you start breaking the universe, everything that we see down around us, into simple code, it matches algorithms that you and I have already devised before we even had the knowledge of them existing in the universe. Which means that all of the information that we will ever achieve already exists, because energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Ponder that one for a while. Every bit of information about everything that we will ever create already exists, and that's according to the law of thermodynamics, and it is never been visibly disproven in the natural world. What does that mean about your life? And what does that mean about your death? God bless you and yours, and have a wonderful day.